Everyone taking part in King Charles's coronation here at Westminster Abbey in May 2023 will have spent hours rehearsing. Every move will have been carefully rehearsed and will be perfectly executed. But there have been plenty of times when these coronations have gone a little off script, from the fire which almost cancelled William I's crowning, to the time when Queen Caroline was banging on the doors here, excluded from the crowning of her husband George IV. These are some of the most eventful coronations in British history. We'll start with what might have been the first coronation that took place at Westminster Abbey. That of William the Conqueror, who was crowned here on Christmas Day all the way back in 1066. It is possible that Harold Godwinson, the last Anglo-Saxon king, was also crowned here earlier in the same year, but that's a different story. William of Normandy, as he was originally known, was born in France in 1027 and became King of England after his famous victory against Harold at the Battle of Hastings. With the Anglo-Saxons defeated, William marched to London, overcoming the last remnants of local resistance on his way, and was crowned at the Abbey. Because William was a French speaker, the ceremony was performed in English and French by both the Archbishop of York and the Bishop of Coutances. But when the French-speaking Normans and the English-speaking Saxons shouted their approval, the Norman soldiers outside thought the noise inside was an assassination attempt. They began setting fire to houses around the abbey. Smoke filled the church. Riots broke out, and the congregation fled. The coronation continued, despite the chaos outside, although William is said to have been trembling from head to toe by the time it finished. The next coronation I want to tell you about is that of Richard I, known as Richard Lionheart. His coronation in September of 1189 was so sumptuous and so expensive that perhaps that's why it's the first one for which we have a contemporary account. But what was a glorious golden day for him was one of the darkest of days for London's Jews. We have some interesting details from Richard's coronation, such as the crown being so heavy it needed to be held up by 2 earls. But it was during the banquet, after the ceremony, that events took a terrible turn. Traditions of the time barred all Jews and women from attending Richard's investiture. Despite this, some Jewish dignitaries defied the decree and showed up bearing gifts for the new monarch. According to Ralph of Diceto, the Archdean of Middlesex, Richard's courtiers reacted angrily to this and stripped, whipped and flogged the Jews, then flung them out of court. When a rumour spread that Richard had ordered all Jews to be killed, the people of London attacked the predominantly Jewish neighbourhood of Old Jewry, setting the Jews' stone houses on fire at night and killing those who tried to escape. When news of the slaughter reached King Richard, he was outraged, but only managed to punish a few of the assailants because of their large numbers. Devastatingly, this incident ended up being the first of many acts of anti-Jewish violence over the next few years, with massacres taking place in York, King's Lynn and Lincoln in 1189 and 1190. Since 1066, nearly all English and British monarchs have been crowned here at Westminster Abbey, but there have been a couple of exceptions. I'm going to tell you about the last time an English king was crowned away from the capital, and it was in a time of war during a French invasion in 1216. It was the crowning of King Henry III, and it took place in Gloucester Abbey. Henry was staying with his mother in Dorset when his father, the much maligned King John, died. As Henry was only 9, his father had appointed a council of executors to help him run the kingdom. It was a difficult political situation. Prince Louis of France had recently invaded on the invitation of certain English nobles, and his rebels held the southeast. So loyalist leaders decided to crown Henry immediately to reinforce his claim to the throne. He was hastily taken to Gloucester Cathedral and was crowned there rather than at the Abbey. And it wasn't the only hiccup. The royal crown had been either lost, sold or sunk in an estuary during the Civil War, so Henry was crowned using a simple circlet belonging to his mother. Despite the inauspiciousness of his investiture, King Henry III ended up ruling for 56 years, and his reign had a significant impact on the political, religious and economic life of the nation. The next coronation I want to talk about is one of the most important and is infused with such symbolism, not because of its mishaps, but because it marked the end of a period of conflict, the Wars of the Roses, and the birth of the Tudors. King Henry VII's crowning on a crisp October day in 1485 was the endpoint in a long series of civil wars that had been going on since the aftermath of the death of the warlike King Henry V in 1422. The wars ravaged English society for years and finally came to an end in 1485 when Henry VII sailed across the English Channel from France to South Wales with a force of around 2,000 men. Henry and his men defeated the incumbent King Richard III, who was killed in battle. This was the end of years of political instability and family infighting, and was the start of the Tudor family's long reign. To mark the new Tudor dynasty, the coronation was particularly lavish, and the day successfully involved the common people, with events like bonfires organised. After the service, King Henry VII headed to Westminster Hall for a feast. While he was famous for the rest of his life for being frugal, he clearly spared no expense at the coronation. Partly, this was a way to throw down the gauntlet and show his legitimacy as king. Clearly, it was a move that worked, as his family were to stay in power for over another century. One of the most dramatic coronations was that of George IV, because he hated his wife and excluded her from attending his crowning. Originally scheduled for 1820, the ceremony was actually postponed because of parliamentary proceedings against George's estranged wife, Caroline of Brunswick. The House of Lords had demanded that Caroline appear before them with the intention of dissolving her marriage to the Prince Regent. This was because of her embarrassing behaviour in Europe, which apparently included dancing at a ball in Geneva naked to the waist and becoming involved with a foreigner of low station. The case was eventually dropped, and the coronation took place in April 1821. But Caroline was not to be part of her husband's big day. When she asked the Prime Minister what dress to wear for the ceremony, she was told that she would not be taking part in it. Nevertheless, Caroline arrived at the door of Westminster Abbey demanding to be admitted to the ceremony. Despite her screams and shouts, the pages did not let her in, and the door was slammed in her face. This didn't stop her. She tried to get in through a side entrance through the nearby House of Lords. But this attempt was also foiled. Undaunted, Caroline drove back to her house and sent a note to the king asking for a coronation next Monday. However, this did not happen and she was written out of the ceremony and died, sadly, just 19 days later. Poor Caroline. Queen Victoria's coronation on the 28th of June 1838 was famous for its mishaps. She was 19 years old and she wrote in her diary that she only came here and started rehearsals the night before the coronation. The ceremony was dragged out over 5 hours and suffered from a serious lack of preparation. Apparently no one except the Queen and the Sub-Dean of Westminster knew it was supposed to be happening. Among the setbacks was a ring that was too small and was painfully forced onto Victoria's wrong finger, and even more dramatically, there was an incident in which an elderly peer fell down the steps while making his homage to the Queen. Queen Victoria recounted the incident in her journal, writing, "Poor old Lord Rolls, who is 82 and dreadfully infirm, fell in attempting to ascend the steps. Rolled right down, but was not the least hurt. When he attempted to ascend the steps, I advanced to the edge in order to prevent another fall." A confused bishop then wrongly told Victoria that the ceremony was over. She quickly had to return to her throne to finish the service. Even Benjamin Disraeli, who later became Prime Minister, commented on the lack of preparedness on the day, saying those involved in the coronation were always in doubt as to what came next, and you saw the want of rehearsal. During the coronation, Queen Victoria also changed outfits twice, and the royal family were seen ducking out of the main abbey and into St Edward's Chapel. There, they supposedly had sandwiches and bottles of wine to munch on during the obscenely long service. Despite this, the Queen was very happy with the ceremony, writing in her diary that it was the proudest day of her life. The last coronation anyone really remembers is that of Elizabeth II. It took place on the 2nd of June 1953, and it was the first to be televised. Many people went out and bought or rented their first television sets for the occasion, and as a result, it was watched by 27 million Brits. Queen Elizabeth II had never expected to become Queen. Her father, King George VI, only took the throne when his brother, Edward, abdicated to marry the American socialite Wallis Simpson. Elizabeth was on an official visit to Kenya when she received the news that her father had died and she would ascend to the throne. Her tour of the Commonwealth was abandoned, and the young princess flew back to Britain as Queen. On the eve of her coronation, the Queen made a radio broadcast to the Commonwealth in which she pledged her devotion to its people, saying, "Throughout all my life, and with all my heart, I shall strive to be worthy of your trust." The ceremony in Westminster Abbey was broadcast on radio around the world, and, at the Queen's request, on television for the first time. Television brought the splendour and significance of the coronation to millions of people around the world in a way never before possible. It's estimated that over half the British population tuned in, and the worldwide audience was nearly 300 million. There were more than 2,000 journalists and 500 photographers from 92 nations on the coronation route. Well, there we have it. Some of the most exciting, bizarre and strange coronation moments from centuries of services in this building behind me. I doubt we'll see many hiccups this time round, but the service will still be memorable. With an anthem specially written by Andrew Lloyd Webber, to the oil of the anointing process being consecrated in Jerusalem itself, this service will be a blend of old and new. And some of those rituals have a tradition stretching back 1,000 years. Let's hope it all goes smoothly. Oh, sorry, mate. Thanks for watching this video on the History Hit YouTube channel. You can subscribe right here to make sure you don't miss any of our great films that are coming out. Or if you are a true history fan, check out our special dedicated history channel, historyhit.tv. You're going to love it.